The morning sun hadn't cleared the eastern perimeter of Camp Ironwood when Commander Caspian Blackwell pushed through the mess hall doors at 0630. 2,000 military personnel looked up from their breakfast trays. Not because he'd made noise, because men like Blackwell didn't need to make noise to command a room. 6'4", 235 pounds of muscle and scar tissue earned across 4 continents and 12 years of operations most Americans would never read about in any newspaper. The Navy SEAL trident pinned to his uniform wasn't decoration. It was a brand, a declaration, a warning that said, "I am the most dangerous person you will ever meet, and I earned that distinction in blood." His face carried the weathered look of a man who'd seen things that aged you faster than calendars could measure. 36 years old, but his eyes belonged to someone twice that. 152 confirmed kills, 3 Purple Hearts, 2 Bronze Stars, a Silver Star with a citation so classified that even members of Congress couldn't read the full report. They called him Hammer. The nickname wasn't poetry. It was mathematics. Precise, lethal, final. Private First Class Thatcher Owl felt his stomach tighten from his corner table. 21 years old, Marine Infantry. 3 weeks ago, Cole had hesitated for 2 seconds during an obstacle course drill. Blackwell had been observing. The consequences had lasted 3 hours. Push-ups until his arms gave out. Flutter kicks until he vomited. More push-ups in his own vomit, while Blackwell explained to everyone within earshot what happened to Marines who froze. The incident hadn't been officially reported. These things never were. You didn't report Navy SEALs, not if you wanted a career, not if you wanted to avoid becoming permanent target. Lieutenant Adrian Hayes watched Blackwell load his breakfast tray from 3 tables over. 27 years old, Marine Corps officer. 3 months ago, Blackwell had cornered her in a supply room. His hand on her lower back sliding down, his breath on her neck, his voice telling her that female Marines were usually distractions, but at least she was easy on the eyes. She had frozen. That's what bothered her most. All her training, all her conviction that she'd fight back if it ever happened. She froze. When she tried to report it, her executive officer gave her a paternal smile and suggested she was misinterpreting friendly advice from a decorated veteran. Blackwell had PTSD after all. Cut him some slack. Think about whether she really wanted to make accusations that could ruin both their careers. She hadn't pushed it. The shame of that decision lived in her chest like a stone. Now Hayes watched Blackwell's eyes lock onto someone across the mess hall, and she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope mixed with dread. Hope that someone might not back down. Dread about what Hammer did to people who challenged him. Blackwell wasn't looking at Hayes this morning. He was looking at the woman sitting alone at the corner table near the emergency exit. She was maybe 5'5", athletic build, long blonde hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore an olive green V-neck shirt fitted tucked into military camouflage cargo pants. Standard issue boots, no visible rank, no insignia, nothing that identified her as military or civilian. She was reading a technical manual. Her back was to the wall. Her seat faced the entrance. Her body language was relaxed, but her positioning was tactical. These details registered in Blackwell's predator brain immediately. What registered more was that she hadn't looked at him when he entered. Every other person in the mess hall had acknowledged his presence, a glance, a nod, a sudden intense interest in their breakfast. But this woman had simply continued reading, continued eating her toast, continued existing in his space without granting him the tribute of her attention. His ego registered it like a slap. "Morning, miss." Blackwell's voice carried that particular texture of forced friendliness wrapped around steel. He stopped beside her table, uninvited, his tray still in his hands, his presence looming. "Haven't seen you around before. I'm Commander Caspian Blackwell, Navy SEAL Team 4. The woman looked up from her manual. Her eyes were ice blue. They met his with a steady, unimpressed gaze. She held the stare for exactly 2 seconds, then returned to her reading. "Good morning." That was it. 2 words, delivered with the emotional temperature of someone reading a weather report. His smile remained fixed but stopped reaching his eyes. He set his tray down on her table. Uninvited, unwanted. "You new to the base?" She looked up again. Her expression suggested she was being interrupted during something important. Something like that. She returned to her manual. Blackwell noticed her hands. No ring, short nails, calluses on the knuckles in the heel of her palm. Those weren't office worker hands. Those were hands that knew violence intimately. "Well, let me officially welcome you to Camp Ironwood." He sat down across from her without asking permission. "This is a serious military installation. We like to know who's sharing our space, especially civilians who seem to have unrestricted access to our facilities. The woman closed her manual with deliberate care. She looked at him fully for the first time, and something in her expression made several of the more experienced soldiers at nearby tables sit up straighter. It wasn't fear. It wasn't intimidation. It was the look of someone evaluating a problem and calculating the most efficient solution. I appreciate the welcome, Commander. My name is Kira Vaughn. I'm here on official business. Her voice was calm, professional, the kind of calm that comes from genuine confidence rather than bravado. Blackwell's predator brain registered this immediately and didn't like it. People who weren't afraid of him usually had reasons. Official business. That's pretty vague. He leaned forward. The intimidation posture. The one that made junior enlisted stumble over their words. The one that made female officers suddenly decide maybe they'd misunderstood things. What kind of official business requires a civilian to have access to a restricted military mess hall, the kind that's above your clearance level, Commander? The words landed like artillery strikes. Marines at 3 surrounding tables found their breakfast fascinating. Adrienne Hayes felt that dangerous hope flare brighter in her chest. Nobody talked to Hammer like that. Nobody. Above my clearance level. It wasn't a question. It was a challenge wrapped in disbelief. Lady, I've earned decorations most people only read about. I've fought in places that don't exist on maps. There's very little in this military that's above my clearance level. Kira picked up her coffee, took a measured sip, set it down with movements precise enough to be ballet, economical enough to be tactical. I'm sure you've had an impressive career, Commander, but my work here doesn't require your involvement or your approval. The mess hall stopped being quiet. It stopped being anything. 2,000 military personnel were invested in this confrontation. They could feel something building, the atmospheric pressure before a storm. Blackwell leaned forward further. His voice dropped to what he considered a menacing whisper, but was loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Listen here, sweetheart. The word landed like a slur. Hayes's hands balled into fists under the table. This is my house. These are my troops, my base, my territory. And I don't appreciate some mystery woman walking in here acting like she owns the place. For the first time, Kira's expression shifted. The neutral mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something underneath that made Blackwell's combat instincts scream warnings he was too proud to hear. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was the kind of cold calculation he'd only seen in the faces of enemy combatants who had already decided you were dead and were just working out the details. Your house. Kira's voice remained calm. But there was steel underneath now. Visible steel, the kind that doesn't just cut, the kind that severs. Your troops, that's an interesting perspective. She began gathering her things with deliberate care, each movement precise, controlled. Respect is earned, Commander Blackwell, not demanded, and it's certainly not granted based on how loudly someone announces their credentials. Blackwell felt his authority cracking in public. He used his considerable height to loom over her, a tactic that had worked on everyone from Taliban fighters to Marine colonels. You want to see what I've accomplished? I've conducted hostage rescues behind enemy lines with zero support. I've neutralized high-value targets in conditions that would break most operators. He paused, made sure everyone was listening. So maybe you should think twice before dismissing what I've done for this country. Kira finished packing her materials, slung her bag over her shoulder, looked up at him. That's quite impressive, Commander. Your service record speaks for itself. For just a moment, Blackwell felt vindicated. Finally, this woman was showing him respect. However, that single word carried more weight than any explosive Blackwell had ever handled. Your service record also includes 3 formal reprimands for conduct unbecoming, 2 incidents of insubordination, a pattern of behavior suggesting you believe your achievements give you license to treat others as inferior, and 1 investigation currently ongoing regarding multiple allegations of harassment and abuse of authority. Time stopped. 2,000 personnel processed what had just been said. Blackwell felt the blood drain from his face. This woman had access to his complete military file, classified information only available to his command structure and military justice officials, which meant she was neither random nor civilian. As I mentioned, I'm here on official business. That business gives me access to a great deal of information about the personnel at this facility. She moved a step around him. His hands shot out and grabbed her arm, hard enough to stop her, not hard enough to bruise, but hard enough for 2,000 witnesses to see it clearly. We're not done here. You don't get to drop bombshells about classified information and just walk away. Something shifted in the mess hall. Every soldier recognized a line had been crossed, a point of no return. Kira looked down at his hand on her arm, then back up at his face. Commander Blackwell, I'm going to give you exactly 3 seconds to remove your hand from my person. It wasn't a request. It wasn't a threat. It was simply information. Like telling someone the temperature or the time. Blackwell should have recognized the tone, should have remembered his training, should have recalled that the most dangerous people in the world are the ones who make violence sound like weather reports. Instead, his ego answered, "Or what? You'll file a complaint. Lady, I've been through more disciplinary procedures than you've had hot dinners. Nothing sticks. It never does." You know why he leaned closer? Close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath. Because I'm valuable. Because I'm decorated. That's how the real military works. Kira's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room dropped several degrees. 3. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. The more experienced soldiers began shifting in their seats. Combat veterans whose instincts screamed that they were about to witness violence that happens too fast to stop. Instead of releasing her arm, Blackwell tightened his grip, deliberately, made sure everyone could see. The way he'd done to Hayes, the way he'd done to every person smaller than him who got mouthy. 2. The single word carried absolutely no emotion. No anger, no fear, just countdown, just information. Blackwell leaned even closer, made sure his voice carried to every corner of the mess hall, made sure 2,000 troops heard him declare his status. Remember, I'm a Navy SEAL. 1. What happened next would be analyzed frame by frame on security footage, would be described in official reports, would be recounted by 2,000 witnesses with remarkable consistency. Kira's right hand moved in a blur. Palm strike targeting the mandibular hinge where jawbone meets skull. The precise anatomical point that disrupts equilibrium and causes neurological confusion. The technique wasn't meant to break bones. It was meant to break balance, to turn the human body's own structure against itself. Blackwell staggered, his 6'4" frame suddenly unable to trust the signals his inner ear was sending his brain. Before he could compensate, Kira swept his legs at the exact moment his weight distribution was most vulnerable. 235 pounds of Navy SEAL went down hard. His body hit the floor with a sound that echoed through absolute silence. When he tried to rise, her boot connected with his solar plexus in a controlled strike that collapsed his diaphragm without causing internal injury. The kind of precision that requires years of training and intimate knowledge of human anatomy. 3.8 seconds. From the moment her hand moved to the moment Blackwell lay gasping on the mess hall floor struggling for air. Kira stood over him, breathing normal, posture relaxed but ready, no satisfaction in her expression, no gloating, just the same neutral calm she'd worn through the entire conversation. Commander Blackwell, her voice carried clearly through 2,000 frozen witnesses. When someone asks you to remove your hand, the appropriate response is compliance, not escalation. Blackwell rolled onto his side, coughing, gasping, his face flushed with oxygen deprivation and humiliation that cut deeper than any blade ever could. 2,000 troops sat in complete stunned silence. The legendary hammer, on a mess hall floor, defeated in 3.8 seconds by a woman half his size who'd given him 3 seconds of warning and every opportunity to make a different choice. Major Jennifer Walsh was the first to break from shock. "Stand down." Though the fight was already over, Kira reached into her jacket with slow, deliberate movements, withdrew a credential wallet, flipped it open. Walsh's expression went through several transformations. Surprise, concern, understanding, dread, Defense Intelligence Agency, Internal Affairs Division, Senior Investigator Kira Vaughn. The photo matched. The holographic seals were legitimate. I had hoped to conduct my business without incident, but Commander Blackwell seemed determined to make that impossible. Blackwell managed to push himself up to sitting. The physical pain was manageable. SEALs trained to handle pain. But the psychological impact was catastrophic. His entire identity, built on being the most dangerous person in any room, had just been dismantled in front of everyone who mattered. "What the hell are you?" he wheezed. Kira turned to address the room. 2,000 personnel, every eye locked on her. What you've just witnessed is what happens when someone allows their ego to override their judgment and their respect for others. Commander Blackwell is a skilled military professional, but his accomplishments don't give him the right to physically intimidate or assault anyone regardless of gender, regardless of apparent civilian status. She paused. Let the silence build. Being a Navy SEAL doesn't place you above accountability. It demands more of it. She turned toward the exit. 2,000 soldiers parted before her. Nobody wanted to be in her way. At the door, she paused, turned back one final time, and Commander Blackwell, her voice carried across the silent mess hall with the weight of prophecy. Colonel Sterling sends his regards. 5 words. The effect was electric. Blackwell's face went from flushed red to pale white in a heartbeat. His mouth opened. No sound came out. Then she was gone. The whispers started 30 seconds later. Then conversations. Then the rush of 2,000 people all trying to process the same impossible event. Adrienne Hayes sat at her table with tears running down her face. Not from sadness, from something she'd stopped believing she'd ever feel again. Validation. Someone had stood up to the man who'd cornered her in a supply room and walked away untouched. Someone had put him on the floor. Thatcher Cole stared at the spot where Blackwell lay. His hands had stopped shaking for the first time in 3 weeks. Staff Sergeant Rowan Mitchell, the woman who owed Blackwell her life from Kandahar, who'd watched his abuse and said nothing for 2 years, closed her eyes. The stone of complicity in her chest shifted. Not gone, but cracked. Finally cracked. Blackwell sat on the mess hall floor, jaw aching, pride in pieces around him like shrapnel from a grenade he'd pulled the pin on himself. His mind fixed on one detail. Colonel Sterling sends his regards. Ghost Sterling. The old man who'd saved his life in Afghanistan. The man who taught him hand-to-hand combat in the mountains outside Kandahar. The man who told him that real strength was knowing when not to use force. Ghost had sent this woman. Ghost had access to classified operations. Ghost had just orchestrated the most complete destruction of Blackwell's career in front of 2,000 witnesses. And somewhere in a farmhouse outside Richmond, Virginia, Colonel Nathaniel Ghost Sterling sat in his study watching the body cam footage on a laptop screen, his weathered face impassive, his eyes revealing something that might have been satisfaction mixed with grief. On the mantel behind him, a photograph of a young woman in Marine Corps dress blues. First Lieutenant Claire Sterling, his daughter, 24 years old in the photo. Dead at 25 because the system had protected her predator and she'd paid the price. Ghost closed the laptop, picked up the phone. It's done. Kira's voice. He took the bait exactly as predicted. Full confrontation. 2,000 witnesses. Assault on a federal investigator. All on video. How do you feel? Like I just poked a wounded animal. He's going to come looking for answers. He'll come looking for me first. We served together. He knows I'm involved now. You ready for that conversation? Ghost looked at his daughter's photograph. Remembered teaching her to ride a bike. Remembered her graduation from Annapolis. Remembered getting the phone call that every parent dreads. I've been ready for 18 years. 7 years before the mess hall at Camp Ironwood. 7 years before Kira Vaughn put a decorated Navy SEAL on the floor in 3.8 seconds. 17-year-old Kira knocked a 24-year-old Marine unconscious in the second round of an unsanctioned fight in a Norfolk boxing gym. Blood on her knuckles, rage in every muscle. 4th illegal fight this month. The crowd, 15 people who'd paid cash at the door, was still making noise when the old man in the corner stopped clapping and started watching. Kira wiped the blood on her cargo pants and headed for the exit. She didn't want conversation, didn't want praise, didn't want anything except the silence of her mother's empty apartment and the dog tags on the bedroom mirror that belonged to a man she couldn't remember holding her. You fight angry. The voice stopped her, not because it was loud, because it carried the weight of someone who'd earned the right to say exactly what he meant without decoration. She turned. The old man was standing now, arms folded, studying her the way a surgeon studies an x-ray before cutting, white-haired, straight-backed. His hands were scarred, knuckles rebuilt so many times they looked like topographic maps of places that didn't exist on any chart. Angry is all I have, she said. Then you'll be dead before 20. His voice didn't soften. Angry doesn't win fights. Angry just makes you feel like you're winning while you're getting destroyed. Who are you, someone who trained your father? Kira's body went still. The gym noise faded to nothing. My father died in the Korengal Valley. Colonel William Vaughn, IED, March 2008. I was 3 years old. The old man took a step closer. He was one of mine. Best natural fighter I ever saw. But rage ate him alive before the bomb finished the job. Then why is he dead? Because the best fighters aren't always the best survivors. Your father fought like you. All heart, no mechanics. All courage, no discipline. He unfolded his arms. He'd be sick watching what you're wasting. The anger surged. The bone-deep fury that had lived inside Kira since the day her Mother sat her down at the kitchen table and tried to explain why Daddy wasn't coming home. The fury she'd been feeding with fists and fights, and the slow self-destruction of a girl who had nothing left to lose because the thing that mattered most had already been taken from her in a valley she couldn't find on a map. You don't know anything about me. I know you hit hard, but telegraph your right cross by dropping your shoulder. I know your footwork is instinctive, but sloppy. I know you won that fight because he was slower, not because you were better. He pulled a photograph from his jacket. Old. Creased. Two men in desert camouflage, arms around each other's shoulders, grinning. One was the old man, 20 years younger. The other was her father. Kira's hands trembled. My name is Nathaniel Sterling, Colonel retired, 49 years special operations. Everyone calls me Ghost. He put the photograph away. I'm going to teach you everything your father should have lived long enough to teach you himself. I don't need a trainer. No, you need a purpose. There's a difference. He reached into his other pocket. An envelope. Worn, creased, ink faded but legible in the handwriting of a man who'd written it knowing he might never come home. Your father's last letter, he gave it to me the night before his final patrol. Said hold it until his daughter was old enough to understand what it meant. Kira took it with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. 3 paragraphs. The last one burned itself into her bones. Tell Kira the most dangerous enemy won't wear a different uniform. He'll wear yours. I learned that in Fallujah when my own squad left me behind because they thought I hesitated. I didn't hesitate. I decided in 3 seconds that their target was a kid with a cell phone, not a bomber. They were wrong. I was right. But they never forgave me for those 3 seconds. Tell her never let anyone decide what she's worth. Not the enemy, not her own people. She pressed the letter against her chest, felt the words sink into her like something she'd always known but never had language for. He wasn't talking about the enemy, Ghost said quietly. He was talking about everyone. Then Ghost told her about Claire, his daughter, First Lieutenant Claire Sterling, Marine officer, smart, tough, everything a father hopes his daughter will become. Stationed at Camp Pendleton, a senior operator, decorated, protected, untouchable, had targeted her, harassment, assault. The system buried it. Commanding officers suggested she was misinterpreting friendly attention. Told her to think about her career. Told her to consider the man's service record. Claire filed the complaint anyway. It disappeared into the bureaucratic void where accountability went to die. The operator faced no consequences. Claire was transferred, isolated, branded a troublemaker. 6 months later, she was dead, 25 years old. Ghost's voice didn't break when he told Kira. It had gone past breaking years ago into something harder. Something that had been forged in grief and sharpened on 18 years of rage that he'd learned the hard way to convert into purpose. The system killed my daughter, not with a bullet, with silence, with indifference, with the belief that a decorated man's career mattered more than a woman's safety. He held Kira's eyes. For 18 years I've been building something. A way to hold predators accountable when the military won't do it. You're going to be part of that. Why me? Because you're angry enough to fight, and I'm going to teach you to be precise enough to win. They trained for 5 years, back rooms, off-hour ranges, parking lots at 4 in the morning, when the world was asleep and the only witness was the Atlantic fog rolling in like God's breath across the water. Ghost didn't teach her to shoot better or run faster. The military would do that. He taught her something no manual covered. How to break a man twice her size using nothing but anatomy and timing. 14 pressure points in the human body. Ghost said during their 3rd session. Hit anyone correctly, motor shutdown, complete, instant. He demonstrated on her forearm, pressure without force. The radial nerve 2 inches below the elbow. Interrupt the signal from brain to muscle. 30 seconds of total hand disability. Show me all 14. You already know where they are. Your body knows its own vulnerabilities. Every point I'm going to teach you is a point you'd instinctively protect if someone attacked. The throat, the eyes, the groin. Obvious. But there are 11 others most people don't know. Those 11 are what separates someone who brawls from someone who wins. 218 repetitions of the radial nerve strike before he nodded. 347 reps of the peronal disruption. 412 of the solar plexus strike. The mandibular hinge, the one she'd used on Blackwell, years later took 509 before Ghost trusted her with it. That strike disrupts equilibrium, Ghost told her. Hit it wrong, you kill someone. Hit it right, they lose all sense of balance for 3 to 5 seconds. That's your window. Sweep the legs during the confusion. Follow with the solar plexus. Fight over. How long does the whole thing take? Under 4 seconds if you're precise. Under 2 if you're perfect. He taught her the 3-second rule, the same principle her father had lived by in Fallujah. 3 seconds to decide. After that, fear wins. But decide in those 3 seconds and you get the rest of your life to execute. And if I can't decide in 3, then you didn't train hard enough. And that's on me, not you. She carried those words through BUD/S. Through Hell Week, where the Pacific Ocean tried to kill her and she refused to let it. Through the moments when instructors told her to quit and she answered with silence. Through the day she earned her trident, first woman in her class, one of the first in history. Ghost was waiting outside the ceremony, didn't come in, didn't want the attention, just stood by his truck in the parking lot and watched her walk out with a pin on her chest. Your father would have cried, Ghost said. Big tough colonel who sobbed like a baby every time he held you. I wish he could have seen it. He did, trust me. When Kira dragged the wounded medic 40 meters under sustained fire in Afghanistan because teams don't leave people behind. When she flanked through a drainage channel, neutralized the mounted gun position, and broke the compound open from an angle the enemy never covered. Silver Star pinned on her chest by the commanding officer. The medic in the front row with his arm in a sling, refusing to stay in medical. Because his exact words were, if Vaughn gets a medal, I'm watching. That night, Kira set the Silver Star beside her father's dog tags. Didn't look at it again. Then Ghost called with a different kind of mission. DIA needs investigators who understand special operations from the inside. People who've earned the trident and know what it means when someone uses it as a shield instead of a standard. You want me to investigate SEALs? I want you to investigate predators. Men who use their status to hurt people the system is supposed to protect. The same kind of man who destroyed Claire. I'm 22 years old, Colonel. Nobody's going to take me seriously. That's exactly why you're perfect. They'll underestimate you. They always do. And by the time they realize what you are, the case is already built and their career is already over. Kira was quiet for a long time. How many are there more than the system admits? Fewer than the system creates. But everyone we remove is one less person someone's daughter has to fear. This is about Claire. This is about everyone. Claire just made sure I couldn't look away anymore. Ghost recruited her into the DIA's Internal Affairs Division. Youngest special investigator in agency history, late 2023. Ghost called Kira to his farmhouse in Richmond. He looked thinner than she remembered. His straight back had curved slightly. The tremor in his hands was new, subtle, but unmistakable. He slid a folder across the table. Commander Caspian Blackwell, Camp Ironwood, 7 formal complaints buried by his teammates. Sexual harassment, abuse of authority, physical intimidation. I've been tracking him for 3 years, building the case, waiting for the right moment, waiting for the right person. He looked at Kira. You're going to be the weapon I couldn't be for Claire. Walk into that mess hall. Let him approach. Let him escalate. Let him grab you. Let 2,000 witnesses see who initiated contact. Let the body cam capture every word, every threat, every second of a decorated warrior choosing ego over honor. Then let him learn on the floor in front of every soldier he's ever intimidated that the woman he dismissed as harmless is the most dangerous person in the room. And you, I'll be watching, building the rest of the case. When he comes looking for answers, and he will, I'll be ready for that conversation. Kira looked at the folder, at Ghost, at the photograph of Claire on the mantle. She took the folder. 3.8 seconds. That's all it took to end the legend of the hammer. But ending legends was the easy part. The part that kept Kira awake at night and drove her forward every morning was what came next. Building the case, hearing the victims, giving voice to the 7 people who'd filed complaints into a system designed to make those complaints disappear. And somewhere on Interstate 95 between Virginia and North Carolina, Caspian Blackwell was driving 400 miles to confront the old man who'd saved his life in Afghanistan and just sent a 22-year-old woman to destroy him. Ghost was waiting. He'd been waiting for 18 years. And the conversation they were about to have would determine whether the hammer could be rebuilt into something worth saving, or whether the destruction that started on a mess hall floor would consume everything he'd ever been. Blackwell drove 400 miles without stopping. His jaw still ached where Kira's palm strike had disrupted his equilibrium in front of 2,000 witnesses. His ribs still throbbed where her boot had collapsed his diaphragm. But those pains were nothing compared to the 5 words burning a hole through his skull. Colonel Sterling sends his regards. He pulled into Ghost's driveway at 1847 hours. The old man was sitting on the porch. 74 years old, thinner than Blackwell remembered, but straight-backed, eyes clear, hands wrapped around a coffee mug with the steady grip of a man who'd killed 9 enemy combatants in Grenada with nothing but those hands and his knowledge of human anatomy. Ghost didn't stand when Blackwell got out of the truck, didn't flinch, didn't react at all, just watched the way a man watches weather he's been expecting. "You sent her," Blackwell said, his voice cracked. He didn't care. "That woman in the mess hall. You sent her to destroy me." "Sit down, Caspian. I don't want to sit down. I want to know why the man who saved my life in Kandahar just orchestrated the most public humiliation of my career." "Sit down," something in Ghost's voice. The same quiet authority that had pulled 3 pinned-down SEALs out of a kill zone in Afghanistan made Blackwell's legs move before his pride could stop them. He sat on the porch steps, hands shaking, jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. "You saved my life," Blackwell said again. "Kandahar 2018. You came into that kill zone like it was a Sunday walk. Pulled all 3 of us out personally. I watched you kill 4 Taliban fighters with your bare hands. I owed you everything." "I did." Then why Ghost set his coffee down? When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of a man who had been holding something for 18 years and was finally putting it down. "Because the man I saved in Kandahar and the man who grabbed that woman's arm aren't the same person. I pulled a warrior out of a kill zone. What I saw in that body cam footage was a bully, a predator, a man who uses his trident as a license to hurt people smaller than him. That's not 7 complaints, Caspian. 7 people filed formal complaints against you. Sexual harassment, abuse of authority, physical intimidation. 7 different human beings were hurt badly enough by your actions that they went through the trouble of reporting it in a system designed to make reporting impossible." Blackwell's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "Your teammates buried every single one. 3 senior enlisted personnel obstructed justice to protect you. Not because they believed you were innocent, because they believed you were valuable. And in this military, valuable men don't face consequences." Ghost's voice dropped. "I know, because the same thing happened to my daughter." "Your daughter," Ghost stood, walked inside, came back with a photograph. A young woman in Marine Corps dress blues, bright eyes, strong jaw, the kind of face that looked like it laughed easily and often. "First Lieutenant Claire Sterling, my daughter, 24 in this photo, dead at 25. Blackwell took the photograph, stared at it. "What happened?" "A senior operator at Camp Pendleton. Decorated, protected, untouchable." Ghost's voice was clinical now. The precision of someone who'd learned that emotion was a luxury the mission couldn't afford. He targeted her. Harassment. Assault. She reported it. The command structure buried it. Told her she was misinterpreting friendly attention. Told her to consider his service record. Told her to think about her own career. Ghost sat down again. His hands were steady. His eyes were not. She filed the complaint anyway. It vanished. He faced 0 consequences. She was transferred. Isolated, labeled a troublemaker. His voice cracked for the first time. Just barely, just enough. 6 months later, she called me at 3 in the morning, said she loved me, said she was tired of fighting a system that would never protect her. I drove 90 miles an hour to her apartment. He stopped, breathed. The kind of breath a man takes when the next words will cost him something he can never get back. I was 11 minutes too late. Blackwell set the photograph down like it was made of glass. His hands trembled. "I didn't know." "No, you didn't. Because men like you never know. You never know because the system makes sure you never have to. Your victims disappear. Your complaints get buried. Your buddies cover for you. And you walk through mess halls like you own the ground while the people you've hurt learn to make themselves invisible." I didn't." Private First Class Thatcher Cole, 21 years old. "You made him do push-ups in his own vomit in front of his entire unit because he hesitated for 2 seconds on an obstacle course. Did you know he considered eating his gun 3 days later?" The blood left Blackwell's face. "Lieutenant Adrienne Hayes, 27. You cornered her in a supply room. Put your hands on her body. Told her she was easy on the eyes. When she tried to report it, the system did exactly what it did to Claire. Smiled, suggested she was overreacting. Buried it. That's not what I wasn't trying to." "What were you trying to do?" Caspian Ghost leaned forward. "Because I've heard every excuse. PTSD, the pressure, the missions, coming home to a country that doesn't understand. I've heard them all. I used them all myself for years after Somalia. But excuses don't erase the damage. They just give you permission to keep doing it." Blackwell pressed his palms against his eyes. His shoulders trembled. Not from cold, from the weight of a man confronting a mirror he'd spent years avoiding. Something broke in me, he whispered. After 2020, the compound in Mosul. We breached a room. Intel said combatants. It was 3 boys. Teenagers. Youngest might have been 14. My team, He couldn't finish. You killed them. They had weapons. At least we thought they did. The investigation cleared us. Rules of engagement were followed. His voice hollowed out. But I see their faces every night, every single night. And instead of getting help, I got harder, meaner, louder. Like if I was scary enough, the nightmares couldn't reach me. So you made other people's lives a nightmare instead. Yes, the word came out like a confession extracted under conditions no court would accept. Yes, that's exactly what I did. Ghost was quiet for a long time. The silence between them held the weight of 2 men who'd both been to the darkest places the world had to offer and come back carrying damage they'd handled in opposite ways. I have 2 questions, Ghost said finally, and how you answer them determines whether I help you or whether I let Kira's investigation crush you completely. Blackwell looked up, eyes red, face wrecked. Do you believe what you did to those 7 people was wrong? Not tactically wrong, not career wrong, morally wrong. Do you understand that you caused real human suffering to people who trusted the uniform you wore? Yeah. No hesitation. God help me. Yes. Second question. If I told you there was a path forward, not an easy one, not a painless one, but a path, would you take it even if it meant losing everything? The rank, the trident, the career, the identity, all of it. What would be left the man underneath? The one I pulled out of that kill zone in Kandahar. He's still in there somewhere. I saw him once. I'm betting he's still worth saving. Blackwell stared at the porch floor for a long time. What do I have to do? Go back, face the investigation, tell the truth, all of it. And when the time comes, plead guilty. Guilty means prison, dishonorable discharge. I lose everything. You lost everything the moment you grabbed Kira's arm. Now you're just negotiating terms of surrender. Ghost picked up his daughter's photograph, held it gently. My daughter deserves someone who cared enough to intervene. Nobody did. I'm giving you the chance to be the intervention I couldn't give her. Not by fighting, by admitting what you are and choosing to become something else. And if I can't, then you prove I wasted 18 years believing redemption was possible. And I'd rather not face that at 74. Blackwell drove back to Camp Ironwood that night. 400 miles of darkness and the kind of silence that happens inside a man when every lie he's told himself finally runs out of air. He reported to the base commander the next morning. Colonel Harrison laid out the charges with surgical precision. Multiple complaints, obstruction by teammates, video evidence from 4 angles. Kira's body cam. A cell phone recording from an off-base bar where drunk Blackwell had bragged about intimidating Adrian Hayes. Your service record doesn't give you immunity from consequences. As of this moment, you're on immediate administrative leave. All clearances suspended. I understand, sir. You're dismissed. Blackwell walked out of the office into a hallway where every Marine and sailor looked away when he passed. The hammer had fallen. Word had spread. The legend was over. Kira conducted the DIA interviews over 3 days. 7 victims, 7 stories, 7 people who'd been hurt by a man the system was designed to protect. Adrian Hayes went first. Military posture, hands folded. Clinical precision until her voice broke. He made me feel like my body was the only thing that mattered. Like all my training and education were irrelevant because I happened to be born female. And when I tried to report it, I was told I was making waves. Did you consider that you might have misunderstood? Kira asked gently. Every day, I convinced myself I was overreacting. Then I saw him do the same thing to other women. Saw the pattern. Realized it wasn't about me. It was about power. Thatcher Cole broke down twice. Couldn't stop his hands from shaking. When Kira asked about the aftermath of the obstacle course incident, the words came out in a rush, like poison being expelled. I thought about ending it. After he humiliated me in front of everyone, after he made me do push-ups in my own vomit, after everyone saw me as weak, his voice shattered. I thought maybe they'd be better off without me. Kira stopped taking notes, leaned forward. But you didn't. You're still here. My mom, she's why I joined. If I'd done that, it would have destroyed her. Your mom should be proud. You survived something designed to break you. You filed a complaint knowing it might disappear. You're sitting here now. That takes more courage than anything Blackwell ever did on a battlefield. Rowan Mitchell went last, the most damaging testimony precisely because she was the most conflicted. Commander Caspian Blackwell saved my life, Mitchell said. Kandahar, IED strike. He pulled me from a burning vehicle under fire. I need that on record, but Kira prompted. But the man who saved me isn't the man who shoved Cole against a wall. Isn't the man who put his hands on Hayes. Isn't the man who created an environment where people were afraid to report abuse because of his status. Mitchell's hands trembled. I watched it happen for 2 years. I watched and I said nothing, because I confused debt with loyalty. Why are you speaking now? Because I watched a 22-year-old woman put him on the floor in 3.8 seconds in front of 2,000 troops. And I realized that if she could stand up to him, the least I could do was tell the truth about what I saw. Kira closed her notebook. The case was built. Overwhelming, undeniable. The only question was whether Caspian Blackwell would fight or accept responsibility. She didn't have to wait long. Blackwell walked into his lawyer's office the next morning. Captain James Barrett laid out the options. Fight, attack witness credibility, play up PTSD, use the service record as a shield. Or plead guilty, take responsibility, face consequences. The video evidence alone destroys any defense, Barrett said. 4 camera angles, body cam. The cell phone footage of you bragging about intimidating Hayes, it's devastating. I'm pleading guilty, Blackwell said. Caspian. I strongly advise guilty. All charges. No deal, no negotiations. Barrett stared at him. You understand this means dishonorable discharge. Possible prison. Loss of everything. Those 7 people deserve justice. I don't deserve to drag them through a trial just to salvage scraps of a career that's already dead. What changed your mind? I drove 400 miles to ask a man I respect why he was destroying me. He showed me a photograph of his dead daughter and told me the system that protected me was the same system that killed her. Blackwell's voice broke. I have 2 choices. Fight and prove I'm exactly the monster they say I am. Or stand up and admit I was wrong and maybe salvage one small piece of honor from this wreckage. Honor won't keep you warm in Leavenworth. No, but it might let me look at myself in the mirror someday. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. Military justice moved fast when the evidence was overwhelming and the defendant wasn't fighting. Blackwell spent his last night as a free man at the obstacle course where he'd broken Thatcher Cole. Ran it alone in the dark, feeling every obstacle like penance, like the beginning of something he didn't have a name for yet. He found Cole the next morning, against orders, against every piece of legal advice he'd been given. Found him at the same obstacle course and stood 10 feet away with his hands visible and non-threatening. Private Cole, Blackwell said. Cole went tight. Afraid, I don't think you're supposed to. I know, I'm violating direct orders being here. Blackwell didn't move closer. I wanted to say I'm sorry. The obstacle course, the humiliation, the wall, all of it. You didn't deserve any of it. Cole stared like Blackwell had started speaking a language that didn't exist. I was dealing with my own damage. Blackwell continued. PTSD I wasn't treating. Guilt I wasn't processing. I took it out on you because you were smaller and younger and couldn't fight back. That's not what a leader does. That's what a coward does. Why are you telling me this? Because tomorrow I'm pleading guilty to charges that will end everything. And before that happens, I need you to know that what I did was about my weakness, not yours. They're interviewing me tomorrow, Cole said quietly. DIA, tell them the truth, all of it. Don't hold back to help me. I don't deserve help. Those 7 people deserve justice. Blackwell turned to leave. Stopped. You're going to be a better Marine than I ever was. You know why? Because you'll remember what it feels like to be on the receiving end, and you'll make sure you never inflict that on anyone else. That's the kind of leader the Corps needs. He walked away before Cole could respond. The young Marine stood on the obstacle course for a long time, trying to process an apology he'd never expected from a man who'd almost broken him. The courtroom was smaller than Blackwell expected, but the weight inside it was enormous. 7 victims in the gallery, Kira in the back row, ghost watching by secure video link from Virginia, and Caspian Blackwell standing before the judge stripped of everything except the truth. His statement took 11 minutes. No excuses, no PTSD defense, no service record shield, just accountability delivered to each victim by name. I used my status as a weapon against people I was supposed to protect. I confused strength with power and power with permission. Every person in this gallery trusted the uniform I wore, and I betrayed that trust. That's not what a warrior does. That's what a coward does. He looked at Cole. I almost destroyed a young Marine whose only crime was being human for 2 seconds on an obstacle course. He looked at Hayes. I made a lieutenant believe her body was the only thing I valued about her service. He looked at Mitchell. I made a woman who owed me her life carry the weight of my crimes in silence because loyalty and debt aren't the same thing. The sentence came down. Dishonorable discharge. Reduction to E1. 18 months at Fort Leavenworth. Forfeiture of all benefits except combat-related medical care. Blackwell didn't react. Didn't flinch. Just stood at attention and accepted the weight of everything he'd earned. In the back row, Kira watched a decorated Navy SEAL walk out of a courtroom in handcuffs. Ghost's trident pin pressed warm against her thigh through her pocket. Her father's dog tags rested against her sternum. She didn't feel triumph. She didn't feel satisfaction. She felt the complicated weight of a woman who'd just delivered justice to 7 people and destroyed a man who'd once been a hero. Two sides of the same reckoning. Fort Leavenworth stripped Caspian Blackwell of everything in the first 48 hours. The trident, the rank insignia, the name tape that had been synonymous with fear and respect on 4 continents. They gave him a number instead. Inmate 47,291. A 6x8 cell, a schedule that treated him no differently than the supply sergeant who'd embezzled funds or the lieutenant colonel who'd committed fraud. The SEALs he trained with fought beside bled for none of them called. Not one. The brotherhood that was supposed to last a lifetime evaporated the moment the dishonorable discharge paperwork processed. Chief Brooks, who'd sent the text saying, "Bro, you need a lawyer," never sent another message. The teammates who'd buried 7 complaints to protect him were facing their own charges and had their own survival to worry about. Blackwell learned something in those first weeks that combat had never taught him. In war, the enemy wears a different uniform. You know who's trying to kill you. In Leavenworth, the enemy was silence. The total annihilating silence of a man sitting in a cell with nothing to fight except the truth about who he'd become. The nightmares came harder without distraction. 3 boys in a compound in Mosul, the youngest 14, maybe younger, holding something that looked like a rifle in the dark. The flash, the sound, the silence after. Then the light revealing what they'd actually been holding. A broom handle, a mop, a piece of broken wood that looked like nothing lethal in the daylight and looked like everything lethal in the 3 seconds where decisions got made. His team had been cleared. Rules of engagement followed. But cleared and clean weren't the same thing. And the faces of those 3 boys had been following him for 4 years, whispering the question he could never answer. What if you'd waited 1 more second? The prison therapist, Dr. Helena Cross, civilian 53, the kind of woman who'd heard every excuse the military-industrial complex could generate and stopped being impressed by any of them, asked him the question nobody else had. When did you start hurting people? I've been hurting people my whole career. That's what SEALs do. When did you start hurting people who didn't deserve it? Blackwell stared at the wall. The question sat between them like something with weight. 2020, after Mosul, after the boys. What happened between the compound and the first complaint? I stopped sleeping. Started drinking. Pulled away from everyone who wasn't operational. My wife left. I don't blame her. I wasn't the man she married anymore. He paused. I wasn't any kind of man. I was just angry all the time. At everything. And instead of getting help, I made my anger everyone else's problem. Why? Because getting help meant admitting I was broken. And broken SEALs don't exist. Broken SEAls get pushed out. So you pretend. You get louder, meaner. You make everyone around you more afraid of you than you are of yourself. His voice dropped. And eventually you stop pretending. You actually become the thing you were faking. A predator. Yes. Dr. Cross closed her notebook. That's the first honest thing you've said in 6 sessions. Does honesty fix anything? No. But it's the foundation everything else gets built on. Lies are quicksand, Caspian. You can build on them, but eventually everything sinks. 3 months into his sentence, Ghost came to visit. Blackwell almost didn't recognize him. The old man had lost weight. His straight-back posture had curved slightly, like a tree that had weathered one too many storms. His hands, the hands that had killed 9 men in Grenada, that had trained Kira to dismantle a man twice her size, trembled against the visiting room table. "You look terrible," Blackwell said. "You're in prison. I don't think you get to judge appearances." Fair point. Blackwell studied Ghost's face. Something was wrong, something beyond age. The tremor in the hands wasn't just fatigue. The weight loss wasn't just stress. The way Ghost held himself carefully like a man protecting broken ribs. "What's going on?" Colonel Ghost set his hands flat on the table, stopped the trembling through force of will. When he spoke, his voice was steady, but underneath it was something Blackwell had never heard from this man. Fragility, pancreatic cancer, diagnosed 2 months ago. They're giving me 6 to 8 months. The words hit Blackwell like a flashbang in a confined space. Disorienting, deafening, obliterating everything else in the room. No, that's what Kira said. Same word, same tone. Apparently everyone thinks they can argue with cancer. You can't. You're Ghost Sterling. You survived Grenada. You survived 49 years of I survived everything the world threw at me. Turns out my own body had different plans. Ghost's mouth twitched, almost a smile. The kind a man makes when the alternative is screaming. I didn't come here for sympathy. I came to ask you a question. Ask. Bitter or better? Blackwell stared at him. That's it. That's the only question that matters now. Not for me. My past decided. For you. You're going to walk out of here in 15 months with nothing. No rank, no trident, no identity, no one waiting, just a name and a record and whatever is left inside you after the uniform comes off. Ghost leaned forward. So which is it going to be? Bitter? Spend the rest of your life blaming the system, blaming Kira, blaming me for taking everything from you. Or better, accept what you did, accept what it cost, and build something worth building from the wreckage. How do I build anything from this? Same way Kira did, same way I did after Claire. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one person helped at a time. Ghost coughed. The sound was wrong, wet, deep. The sound of a body losing a war it couldn't fight with precision or timing. I won't be around to see which one you pick, but Kira will. And she'll know. Why do you still care about me after everything I did? Ghost was quiet for a long time. When he answered, his voice carried the weight of a father who'd lost his daughter and spent 18 years converting that grief into something the world could use. Because my daughter deserves someone who cared enough to intervene. Nobody did. Her commanding officer looked the other way. Her teammates chose silence. The system chose convenience over justice. His eyes were wet. He didn't try to hide it. I couldn't save Claire, but maybe I can make sure the man who became what her abuser was gets a chance to become something else. Not because you deserve it, because she deserved it, and everything I do is for her. Blackwell pressed his palms against his eyes. His shoulders shook. When he spoke, the word came out broken and raw and carrying the weight of a man who'd finally run out of lies to tell himself. Better, I choose better, then prove it. Every day for the rest of your life. Not for me, not for Kira, for the 7 people who had to survive what you did to them. They're your debt now, and you pay it by making sure nobody else has to file the complaints they filed. Ghost stood, extended his hand across the table. Blackwell took it, felt the tremor in the old man's grip, felt the bones beneath skin that had grown too thin, felt the goodbye hiding inside a handshake. Colonel, yeah, thank you, for Kandahar, for the truth, for sending Kira, for all of it. Don't thank me. Thank me by being better. That's the only currency that counts. Ghost walked out of the visiting room. Blackwell watched him go and understood with the certainty of a man who'd spent his career reading tactical situations that he was watching a warrior's final march. The cancer would win. The question was what Ghost would build before it did. 15 months later, Blackwell walked out of Fort Leavenworth with one duffel bag. No trident, no rank, no insignia, nothing except a name and a criminal record and the ghost of a promise he'd made to a dying old man. A figure was waiting in the parking lot, leaning against a dark sedan, arms folded, blonde hair pulled back in the same ponytail she'd worn in the mess hall 17 months ago. Kira Vaughn, figured you might need a ride, she said. Blackwell stopped 10 feet away. His instinct was still to maintain distance, to remember what she'd done to him, to protect the fragments of ego that remained. Why are you here? Ghost asked me to be here. Before the end. Blackwell's duffel bag slipped from his fingers, hit the pavement with a sound that seemed too loud for the weight it carried. When he didn't ask, he didn't need to. 4 months ago, Thursday morning, 0347, Kira's voice was steady, but there was weight underneath it. He left you something, a job. Operation Second Chance. Homeless veteran shelter in Richmond. Night shift. Minimum wage. You'd be protecting people who can't protect themselves. She looked at him. Really looked. People like you. I don't deserve doesn't matter anymore. You made a choice in that courtroom. You chose better. Now you prove it wasn't just words. The shelter was a converted warehouse in a rough part of Richmond. The sign read Operation Second Chance in faded letters that had weathered too many winters. A dozen veterans sat on the steps. They watched Blackwell with the weariness of people who'd learned not to trust easily. The shelter director, James Thornton, former Army Ranger, looked at Blackwell the way combat veterans look at each other. Seeing scars that don't show on the surface? You a veteran? Yes, sir. Navy. Discharged. Thornton didn't ask what kind. The shelter was full of men with dishonorable paperwork and bad decisions and worse luck. You ever hurt anyone who didn't deserve it? Blackwell could have lied. Could have deflected. The old version of himself would have. Yes, sir. Multiple people. I was wrong. Paid consequences. Trying to be better. Thornton nodded slowly. Everyone here has things they're not proud of. We don't judge. We just try to do better today than we did yesterday. He handed Blackwell a security uniform. Shift starts at 2200. Don't be late. Kira drove away that night. Blackwell watched the sedan disappear and understood that the old man had just delivered him to the beginning of something that would either save him or prove that some wreckage can't be rebuilt. The months passed, night shifts at the shelter, VA therapy 3 times a month, online classes in counseling and social work. Blackwell didn't advertise his SEAL background. That person felt like someone else, someone who'd existed before he understood the difference between strength and brutality. One resident, a former Marine named Devin Hayes, severe PTSD from Iraq, couldn't sleep most nights. They talked during Blackwell's 3 a.m. rounds. I killed people, Hayes said one night. Not in combat. Bar fight. Guy died. Prison. Now I'm here. You getting help? Therapy via. A group's help some. Doesn't fix everything. Hayes studied Blackwell. You got that look. What's your story? Blackwell chose honesty. I was a SEAL. Decorated, good at killing enemies. Bad at being human when I got home. Took my trauma out on people who didn't deserve it. Assaulted a federal investigator. Leavenworth. 18 months. Hayes whistled low. That's a fall. Yeah. You bitter about it? Ghost question. Coming from a homeless veteran at 3 in the morning, the universe circling back to make sure he answered the same way twice. Trying not to be. Trying to focus on better. How's that working? Ask me in a year. The call came on a Thursday. Kira's voice. Quiet. Controlled. Carrying the weight of something she'd been holding for hours. He's gone, Caspian. Blackwell sat down. His legs wouldn't hold him. When 0347 this morning. In his sleep. Peaceful. His hands folded across his chest. Was anyone with him? I was. Kira's voice cracked. Just barely. I held his hand. He said one word before he went. Claire. Blackwell pressed the phone against his forehead, felt the tears come. Not the controlled private kind he'd taught himself in prison. Real tears. The kind that don't care about pride or reputation or the mythology of strong men who don't break. He saved my life twice. Once in Kandahar, once in that parking lot. He saved a lot of people. That was the point. That was always the point. Kira, yeah, thank you. For the mess hall, for the investigation, for putting me on the floor in front of 2,000 troops. His voice steadied. You destroyed the man I became so I could find the man I was supposed to be. Kira was quiet for a long time. Ghost told me something once. He said you can't build anything new until you tear down what's broken. Tearing down isn't destruction, it's clearing the ground. She paused. He believed you could be better, Caspian. Don't prove him wrong, I won't. Then that's his legacy. Not the convictions, not the investigations, not the career. The belief that people could change if someone cared enough to hold them accountable. She hung up. Blackwell sat in the shelter security office, alone off bottom, holding a phone that had just delivered the news that the man who'd shaped his life, first by saving it, then by destroying it, then by rebuilding it, was gone. He didn't go to the funeral, didn't stand in line, didn't fold a flag. Instead, he walked into the shelter common room, found Devin Hayes and 3 other veterans who couldn't sleep, sat down with them, and told the story. Not the sanitized version, the real one. A mess hall, 2,000 witnesses, a woman half his size who put him on the floor in 3.8 seconds, a photograph of a dead Marine lieutenant that changed everything, 7 victims who deserve better, a prison cell where the silence taught him more than 12 years of military service, and an old man who believed in 2 words so hard he spent his dying months making sure a broken seal heard them. Bitter or better? The veterans listened, some nodded, some looked away. All of them recognized something in Blackwell's story because all of them carried their own version of the same question. When he finished, Hayes spoke first. So which one did you pick? Blackwell looked at the clock. 0347, the exact time Ghost had died. The coincidence felt like more than coincidence. It felt like the old man delivering one final message from whatever place warriors go when they're done fighting. Better. Every single day for the rest of my life. And somewhere in a gym in Norfolk, Virginia, Kira Vaughn stood in front of a heavy bag at 4 in the morning. Ghost trident pin in her pocket. Her father's dog tags against her chest. Tears on her face and blood on her knuckles. 509 repetitions of the mandibular hinge strike, counting themselves out through hands that wouldn't stop until the grief was empty and the purpose was full. Ghost was gone. The chain he'd built was not. And Kira already knew who she needed to find next. 5 years changed everything and nothing at Camp Ironwood. Kira walked through the mess hall doors at 0643 on a Tuesday morning in March 2029. Same corner table, same technical manual, same olive green V-neck shirt tucked into camouflage cargo pants. Same positioning, back to the wall, face toward the entrance. But the base had changed. She felt it in the way personnel moved through the space. Easier, less tension. Female soldiers sat without the hypervigilance she'd cataloged 5 years ago. Junior enlisted didn't flinch when senior NCOs passed. The atmosphere carried something that hadn't been there before. Not comfort exactly, but the absence of fear. And the absence of fear was its own kind of revolution. Ma'am, Kira looked up. A young gunnery sergeant stood beside her table. Compact, confident. His name tape read Cole. Thatcher Cole. No longer the 21-year-old PFC who'd considered eating his gun after a Navy SEAL made him do push-ups in his own vomit. 26 now, scout sniper instructor. Carrying himself like a man who'd learned that surviving the worst thing that ever happened to him was just the beginning of becoming the best thing he could be. Gunny Cole. Kira closed her manual. I recognize you from the files. His expression flickered. And I recognize you from the floor. You're the investigator from that morning. How are you doing? Good, ma'am. Really good. Teaching kids that excellence doesn't require ego. He paused. Thank you for what you did. For making them listen when nobody else would. You made them listen when you told your story. I just provided the platform. A woman in captain's bars approached. Adrienne Hayes, no longer the terrified lieutenant from the supply room. 32 now, commanding her own company, carrying herself like someone who'd learned that speaking up doesn't make you weak. It makes you necessary. Agent Vaughn, heard you were back on base. Follow-up assessment. Seeing if the reforms took root or if they were just theater. Hayes smiled, not the nervous smile of a victim, the confident smile of a leader who'd built something worth protecting. Come observe my company. See for yourself. I'd like that. First day of my command, Hayes said. I stood in front of 60 Marines and told them the truth. That 3 years before a decorated SEAL cornered me in a supply room, put his hands on me, and the system did nothing. That I froze, that I was afraid, that I almost let that fear end my career. How did they react? Silence. Then a lance corporal in the back row raised her hand and said, Ma'am, what happened to him? I told her. The mess hall, the 3.8 seconds, the investigation, the conviction. Hayes paused. She said, good. That one word from a 19-year-old Marine told me more about how the culture was shifting than any report ever could. 2 months into Hayes' command, a staff sergeant with multiple combat tours made sexually aggressive comments to a junior Marine. Hayes relieved him immediately, initiated formal charges. His buddies complained, said she was overreacting, said boys will be boys. Hayes stood firm. The charges proceeded. The staff sergeant was reduced in rank and transferred. Word spread through the Marine Corps. Captain Hayes meant what she said. Applications to transfer into her company increased 400%. Rowan Mitchell had requested transfer to a training command after the trial. The guilt of complicity. 2 years of watching Blackwell's abuse and choosing silence. It aided her like something corrosive that wouldn't stop until it reached bone. So she converted it, the same way Ghost had taught Kira to convert rage into precision. Mitchell converted shame into education. Every class she taught began the same way. My name is Senior Chief Mitchell. 8 years ago, a Navy SEAL pulled me from a burning vehicle in Afghanistan. He saved my life. 5 years ago, that same SEAL shoved a junior Marine against a wall, and I saw it happen. I said nothing. I chose debt over duty. I chose loyalty over integrity. I was wrong. The Marines would sit in uncomfortable silence while Mitchell explained her failure in detail that made everyone in the room flinch. Someday you're going to see someone abuse their authority. Someone senior, someone respected, someone who's done good things in the past, and you'll have to choose between speaking up and staying silent. She'd look each Marine in the eye. I chose silence. 7 people suffered because I was a coward. Don't be like me, be better. Reports of misconduct increased across units where Mitchell's students were stationed, not because abuse was increasing, because people were finally reporting it. The silence that had protected predators for decades was cracking. Slowly, imperfectly, but cracking. Kira's DIA record had grown in the 5 years since Camp Ironwood. 43 convictions, dozens more cases resulting in administrative punishments or discharges. Base after base, operator after operator who believed their credentials made them untouchable, learning publicly permanently that they were wrong. She never got used to it. That was the part nobody understood. Every investigation cost her something. Every victim's testimony left a mark. Every predator she removed was a reminder that the system still produced them faster than she could take them down. But she kept going, because Ghost had taught her that the work wasn't about winning. It was about reducing the distance between the world as it was and the world as it should be. One case at a time, one voice heard at a time, one predator held accountable at a time. She'd found the girl Ghost told her to find 6 months after his death, a boxing gym in Jacksonville, North Carolina. 17 years old, 5'3", fighting like the world owed her a debt, and she was collecting with her fists. Her name was Autumn Shaw. Father killed in Afghanistan 2022. Mother working 3 jobs. Rage in every punch and nowhere to put it except the faces of anyone stupid enough to step into the ring. Kira watched her fight. Watched the raw power and the sloppy footwork and the right cross that telegraphed by dropping the shoulder. Watched a ghost of herself from 7 years ago. "You fight angry," Kira said after the bout. Autumn turned, sweating, bleeding from a cut above her eye, looking at Kira with the hostile suspicion of someone who'd learned early that adults who paid attention usually wanted something. "Angry is all I have." "Then you'll be dead before 20. The words landed. Kira watched them hit. Watched Autumn's face cycle through the same emotions Kira had felt in a Norfolk gym when a white-haired old man said the exact same thing to her. "Who are you?" "Someone who was you 7 years ago." Same gym, same anger, same dead father, same belief that fighting was the only thing keeping me alive. Kira held up her hands, showed the calluses, the scars, the knuckles that had been rebuilt by 5 years of training and 7 years of operational service. "Someone taught me there was a difference between fighting angry and fighting precise, between destroying yourself and building something worth protecting." "What do you want to teach you what he taught me before the anger eats you alive, the way it almost ate me?" Autumn stared at her for a long time. The gym noise faded the way it does when 2 people are having a conversation that matters more than either of them can articulate. "What's in it for you?" "A promise I made to a dying man. He told me to find this next angry girl and teach her that precision is stronger than rage." Kira pulled Ghost's trident pin from her pocket, held it in her palm. The metal warm from being carried close to her body for 5 years. "This pin belonged to someone who mattered. It's been through wars and grief and more fights than you can imagine. It doesn't belong to me. It belongs to whoever comes next. I'm not a SEAL. Not yet." Autumn looked at the pin, then at Kira, then at the pin again. "When do we start tomorrow?" 4 a.m., she paused. "And Autumn, eat something tonight. You're shaking and it's not from the fight. That was 18 months ago." Autumn Shaw was currently in BUD/S Class 418. 8 women in the class, more than any before. She'd made it through Hell Week, made it through dive phase, was grinding through land warfare with the same relentless refusal to quit that Kira had carried and Ghost had built, and William Vaughn had died believing his daughter would inherit. Kira sat at the corner table in the Camp Ironwood mess hall and opened a folder. Not the technical manual she'd used as cover 5 years ago, a real folder. Assessment reports, culture metrics, incident tracking. The data told a story that statistics rarely tell well. The story of a place that had been sick and was slowly, imperfectly, stubbornly getting healthier. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Agent Vaughn, this is Caspian Blackwell. Heard you were back at Ironwood. Wanted you to know I'm still choosing better every day. 5 years and counting. Ghost would be proud of what you've built. I hope you are too." Kira stared at the message. 5 years since she'd put him on the floor. 5 years since 7 victims told their stories. 5 years since a courtroom in North Carolina ended one version of Caspian Blackwell, and the first fragile breath of another version began. She'd tracked him. Not officially. Personally. The shelter in Richmond had promoted him to assistant director. He ran programs for homeless veterans. used his own story, all of it unedited, as a cautionary tale about what happens when trauma turns inward and becomes a weapon aimed at the people closest to you. He still had nightmares about 3 boys in Mosul, still carried the weight of 7 people he'd hurt, still woke up some mornings feeling the phantom pain of a trident pin that was no longer on his chest. But he'd chosen better, and he'd kept choosing it. 5 years of daily decisions that nobody saw and nobody applauded and nobody gave him credit for. Because redemption isn't a ceremony. It's a practice, she typed back. Ghost would say, don't thank me. Thank me by keeping at it. Bitter or better, every day. The response came 30 seconds later. Every day until I run out of days. She put the phone down, looked around the mess hall. 2,000 troops eating breakfast. Officers and enlisted, men and women. The machinery of American military power doing what it did every morning at every base around the world. Somewhere in this room, a senior NCO was treating a junior Marine with the respect they deserved. Not because regulations demanded it, because the culture had shifted enough that respect was becoming reflex instead of exception. Somewhere in this room, a female officer was sitting without calculating her proximity to the nearest exit. Not because threats had disappeared, because the system had learned slowly, painfully, through 3.8 seconds on a mess hall floor, and 7 voices finally being heard that protecting its people was more important than protecting its legends. Somewhere in this room, a young Marine who'd heard the story was carrying it like a compass. Not because it was dramatic, because it was true. And true stories change the way people think about power and who gets to wield it and what happens when they wield it wrong. Kira gathered her materials, rose to leave, walked toward the same door she'd walked through 5 years ago when 2,000 troops parted before her and nobody wanted to be in her way. This time, nobody parted, nobody stared. Nobody whispered. She was just a woman in an olive green shirt walking through a mess hall. Unremarkable. Unnoticed. That was the victory. Not the dramatic takedown, not the conviction, not the ceremony. The victory was becoming unnecessary. The victory was a room where a woman could walk through without anyone needing to decide what she was before she opened her mouth. At the door, she paused. Not for effect, not for a final statement, just to feel it. The weight of 5 years. 43 convictions, hundreds of victims given voices, 1 mentor lost, 1 angry girl found, 1 trident pin still warm in her pocket, carrying the legacy of a man who'd survived wars and died believing that the fight for accountability was the most important one he'd ever waged. She pushed through the door and walked into the Carolina morning. Her phone buzzed again. Autumn Shaw, a photo from BUD/S Muddy, exhausted, grinning, holding up the number 18. Her class ranking after land warfare. Not first, not last, solidly operational, undeniably qualified. Below the photo, 1 line of text. The chain extends. Kira smiled, the first real smile in weeks. Her phone buzzed a 3rd time. Not a text, an email. Encrypted. Defense Intelligence Agency header. Sent from a delayed server. Subject line, "It in case I don't make it." N. Sterling. Kira's hands froze on the steering wheel. She opened it. The message was dated 6 months before Ghost's death. A dead man's switch. Programmed to send if he didn't cancel it weekly. Kira, if you're reading this, I'm gone. The cancer won or I ran out of time. Doesn't matter which. What matters is the attached file. Case number 001. The first predator. The one who destroyed Claire. He's still out there. Still protected. Still climbing. Colonel Marcus Thorne. Currently Joint Chiefs candidate. Pentagon. The man who buried my daughter's complaint. The man who told her commanding officer that Claire was overreacting to friendly mentorship. The man who made sure the operator who assaulted her faced 0 consequences while Claire was transferred to a unit that deployed to Fallujah 3 months later. She didn't die in Fallujah, but the transfer was the beginning of the end. 43 convictions is remarkable work. I'm proud of every one. But Thorne is different. He's not a single predator. He's the architect of the system that protects them all. 3-star general. Decorated, connected, untouchable. You know what to do with untouchable men. The file contains everything. Financials, communications, a pattern going back 20 years. 12 women, all buried, all transferred. 2 dead. This is the mission I couldn't finish. The one that matters more than all 43 combined. Be precise. Be patient. And when the moment comes, remember what I taught you. Predators wear stars too, and they bleed the same as everyone else. Finish it, Kira. For Claire, for the 12. For all of them. Ghost PS. The trident pin in your pocket belonged to Claire. I gave it to her when she made lieutenant. She was wearing it the night she died. I want you to have it. Not as a burden, as a reminder. Some fights take years, some take decades, but they're all worth fighting. Kira sat in the parked car, the Camp Ironwood mess hall in her rearview mirror. Autumn's text still on her screen. She opened the encrypted file. Photographs, emails, transfer orders with Thorne's signature. 12 women, 12 buried complaints. A pattern so clear it was almost art. And at the bottom, current assignment, Pentagon Office of the Joint Chiefs, security detail rotation, access points, vulnerabilities. Ghost had been planning this for 18 years. Every case she'd worked, every conviction, every skill she'd mastered, it was all preparation for this. Colonel Marcus Thorne didn't know it yet, but somewhere in a parking lot outside Camp Ironwood, a 27-year-old woman with 43 convictions and her mentor's dying wish was reading his file, and his time was running out. She typed back to Autumn, now extend it. Then she got in her car, Claire's trident pin in her pocket. She understood now. Ghost hadn't just given her his daughter's pin. He'd given her his daughter's mission. Her father's dog tags warm against her chest. The silver star in a drawer she rarely opened. The letter from William Vaughn folded soft from being read 1,000 times. And a new file, Case 001. The biggest predator. The one who wore stars. Kira Vaughn started the engine. Not toward another routine investigation. Not toward another base with another complaint. Toward Washington, D.C. Toward the Pentagon. Toward a 3-star general who'd spent 20 years building a system that protected predators and destroyed the women who reported them. Toward a reckoning 18 years in the making. The work would never be finished. Not because the world wouldn't change, because it changed slowly. One case at a time, one voice at a time, one girl in a boxing gym at a time, one man choosing better over bitter at a time. But it changed. Ghost believed that before she did. Her father wrote about it in the letter she'd earned the right to read. Blackwell proved it by choosing accountability every morning for 5 years. Hayes proved it by commanding with respect. Cole proved it by teaching without ego. Mitchell proved it by saying the 3 hardest words in the military vocabulary. I was wrong. It would never be perfect. But it was better, and better was worth fighting for. Every single day, until the rooms changed, until the silence broke, until accountability applied to everyone. Not just the ones without medals, not just the ones without stars. Colonel Marcus Thorne was about to learn what a ghost daughter could do. The chain extended, the knowledge multiplied, the mission continued, and Kira Vaughn drove toward the fight that mattered most.